I also forgot to mention that adobo is a cooking style. It's not a particular recipe, okay? If you encountered French dishes that say fish à la Meunière or Provençal, it would be in the style of, right? So you can also liken the adobo to that kind of a description in the style of adobo, okay? And there are several ways to cook adobo. You can stew, you can roast, you can braise. I guess you can even poach if you wanted to do that with fish. You could grill, you could barbecue, make an adobo rub. I'm also going to show you that we went a little French today, and I even made a pâté out of the adobo. So again, the three important elements just have to be present in that adobo. Whether your vinegar is a coconut, sugarcane, or even balsamic vinegar. I've made adobo with red wine. I've made adobo with white wine vinegar. There is a little bit of a difference naturally, but then again, the sour notes, the garlic, the fat, you will approximate the taste of the adobo. Okay, so let's get started. Yeah. I notice here in Europe, we don't have too much fat in our pork. In fact, there is no skin, which is really an ideal quality in the adobo recipe. So the solution I have for that is to add oil, in this case olive oil, to replace the fat that is not present in the pork. And we have equal portions of pork and chicken in our recipes. Like I said, the standard is chicken and pork, but you can also add beef. The chicken livers can come in, the gizzards can come in, but that's really up to you. In this case, we're just using chicken and pork, okay? So we'll make the marinade. You could have marinated this earlier on. Sorry. This feels funny.
That's okay.
Okay. Okay. You could have marinated the meat earlier on with 1 part soy sauce and 2 parts vinegar, and all the other aromatics that go with it, and then you would throw that into a pot. But we can also do that, straight off here in the pan. Okay. So this is the sugarcane vinegar, 2 parts with 1 part soy sauce. This is optional. There are some adobos they call white adobo, and there are also some adobos that you call brown adobo. Adobo. Okay, there you go. Garlic, lots and lots of garlic. Depends. Unlike pastry chefs, we chefs are very bad. We never measure, because then again, the quality of the ingredients that we use and that are available to us varies. I find that some of the garlic used in some other countries are not as pungent. So you want to use a little bit more of that if you want to, okay? So I have my garlic in here. I have some cracked peppercorns. Okay. About 2 or 3 bay leaves. Optional. I grew up not eating adobo with bay leaf because my mother hates bay leaf. Pork. You could use a pork shoulder or the belly, where the fatty portion is. But like I said, if you can go to an Asian market where they can sell you the pork with the skin, it's even better, because when the pork starts to caramelize at the bottom of the pan, that's where all the concentration of the wonderful flavors are going to be. So, this would be a stewing procedure. You can braise if you want. we have to make a lot of adobo today, and so we use the rational oven, and we actually braise the adobo. There are ways around how to make the adobo after you braise it or after you stew it, but suffice it to say that if you follow the simple ratio, that I think you can approximate a proper adobo. Some people opt to add water in the adobo, but then again, depending again on the the moisture content of the meat, of the chicken and the pork, sometimes it's enough that you rely on the water that comes from the meat. But ideally, some people add water, just enough, so that it almost covers the meat. Salt, I would do at the very end, because then soy sauce reacts, acts as a salt in the dish. And so I noticed that particularly in Europe, there's a tendency to be less salty in what you eat. And so that is a preference on your part. Okay? Some people who've had the adobo were quite surprised, because then, especially if you're not accustomed to the sour notes in a dish, there's a tendency to think, oh, am I going to like this, because it's not something I'm accustomed to. But I'll let you be the judge later on. So this would cook for about an hour or so. You will notice that the chicken will cook ahead of the pork. So the thing to do there is to remove the chicken and set it aside and continue cooking the pork until it's nice and tender and the liquid becomes more concentrated. So you have more of a thicker sauce to it, okay? That will be the secret to the adobo. Okay, this is something that not too many people know, but the secret to a good adobo is the caramelization of the fat. Oh, is there somebody's already? That's true, yes, right. Because then you can have an adobo that's a soupy or watery adobo, or a tough adobo that's, all black with soy sauce and very salty. But the balance of the sourness and the salt, and in fact a little bit of the sweetness from the caramelization of the garlic, is what makes the adobo a well-rounded dish, which we eat with rice, with some pickles or some salads, or in this case we've made pickled cucumbers here that will go with the dish later on, and some pickled mangoes, pickled green mangoes. So you can almost imagine the combination of flavors, the contrasts in flavors and textures, which makes for a very interesting taste experience. Okay, so this you would just leave and cook down. The fat is obviously going to thicken the sauce. And if you're if you're used to watching cooking shows, in French cooking particularly, they say that when the food starts to, how do you call this? It starts to brown, and then at the bottom of the pan you have all the toasted bits, at the bottom of the pan, and they say that's exactly where the concentration of all the flavors are. All right. Didn't I say earlier you remove the chicken because the pork is going to cook longer than the chicken? You remove about 2/3 of the liquid and set that aside and cook down the pork. So it's naturally almost going to fry in the pan. When that's done, you throw back the chicken and the remaining liquid, and you actually deglaze your pan, so that all those flavors start to melt together to round up the dish. Salt is something you would do in the end, depending on, again, the brand of soy sauce you use. If you use the Japanese soy sauce, Kikkoman, it's very salty. It's a very thick soy sauce, and so the probable results of your adobo is going to be quite salty. If you use the Chinese soy sauce that we use. This brand in particular is not the salty, and so in the end, we're probably going to adjust the seasoning with the salt. But then again, that is up to you. Okay? Is that clear? Do you think this is something you can do at home?
Yes.
Okay, because I'd love to see this recipe or this dish, you know, alongside some Vietnamese and Thai dishes in the restaurants that they'll serve here. In fact, if the school is listening, I'd love to see the adobo served one time. Hello? Right, okay. So this is cooking up, and in my region, where we use less soy sauce, actually soy sauce just for coloring,